this is the topic of this presentation here. So only fearing the understandable is the single most idiotic, human-centric thing that we can and will do forever. So this is what we're evolved to fear. It's a social fear. It's a fear that is very biological. So if we're scared of social ostracization, we're scared of war, we're scared of things like famine, we're scared of very direct conflict. This is what we should actually be afraid of. So there's so much more out there that we cannot control, and that can decimate us and has decimated multiple life forms. And we are not equipped to actually deal with any of this type of stuff. And we're definitely not equipped to deal with this type of stuff. So this is probably artistic. Someone took some liberties in how this was represented, but of dark matter, which constitutes about 80%, we assume, of the mass of anything out there in the universe, and we really don't know what it is. So, story time. When I was a kid, people would talk about, they'd be like, "Oh, what's your fear?" And people sometimes still have those conversations like, "Well, are you afraid of snakes? Is it spiders?" Anyone in the room? Maybe? Yeah. So these two types of things are very evolutionarily based again. There's some good reasons to be afraid of spiders, to be afraid of snakes. Maybe you're afraid of heights. So maybe it's actually I saw a hand. Okay, got another hand. It's maybe a little dangerous to be on the side of a cliff, just hanging out, hoping for the best, and not the worst. It's safer if you don't encounter these things, so we tend to, not put ourselves in harm's way. But those things, I can see why you'd be afraid of them, but it just didn't really grab me for some reason. So I found out just on a couple of maybe quiet suburban nights. When you watch a scary movie and you are home alone and there is nothing really going on and there's just a deafening silence. I found that I wasn't actually scared of any of those types of monsters, any of the imagination that really grabs a hold of you, except for maybe something kind of like this. And this is the best representation of it that I could find as an image without making something. Sorry I didn't make something. But this was basically, I was scared of just walking around anywhere really, and to suddenly see some kind of a silhouette. So some kind of a silhouette, didn't really matter of what it would be, just that it would be human-like, and that it would be of another dimension of sorts, almost like a cutout of the 3D representation that we know and understand. And I was afraid that I would surprise it just as much as it surprised me, and that it would break me, to be honest. I was afraid of losing my mind because there was nothing else that I could really understand about it, and that it would completely destabilize. I also found out that I was afraid of free fall. So not so much of heights, but one beautiful summer day, went and did some cliff jumping into some water, which was really fun, but also completely terrifying. I found that I was very afraid of not as much the jumping, not as much the height, but just that actual feeling of falling into nothingness. And it was actually only in making this talk that I realized they were kind of the same thing, but in opposite ways. On one side, I was afraid of having a silhouette of something that would be nothingness. And on the other side, I was scared of being surrounded by nothingness, having no context, having nothing. What is nothing? How do you start to define that? So, but how is this related to the future, really? Well, the future has a lot to do with nothing, really. We do have an arrow of time in our perception. This is the present. We can all kind of agree on that. But this is also the past. So it's the past as we remember it. Past remembering it and past it having some kind of an influence on where we are now. We don't really know what the past is, nor do we really know what the future is. And by the way, we imagine the future in the same way that we recollect the past. In our brains, it's the same thing. Something that's not really often talked about is that when you lose your ability to remember things, you also lose a certain specific ability to plan the future, to foresee what's going to happen. And this has had a huge role in our evolution. So really, we know nothing about time. I got pretty interested in the concept of time still, and found that it kind of fell into three categories. The first one is when we talk about time, we talk about time measurement. We also talk about time perception. And then there's space-time. And in common conversation, we kind of mess it all up together, but they're actually quite different. So first off, measurement. So these are some time measurement devices. The first one is a water clock. So you can see, maybe you can see, at the bottom there's a little spout, and it's a specific size, and you can measure the time based on how much water is left in the vessel. The middle one you'll also recognize as a sundial, and of course a mechanical clock. So the thing that all these have in common is this unit of time. So something repeatable, something that is consistent, reliable. These are the things that we've used and that we still use nowadays to measure time. So this is an atomic clock. Right now, one of the most, the most precise one. I believe the next one that people are looking at is a nuclear one. So this is where it started breaking down for me, is at perception. So time perception is a sense in the same way that sight is, in the same way that hearing is. And we don't measure it at the same place for every type of time. So, for example, with our sense of hearing is a lot more precise in being able to distinguish amounts of time than our sense of sight. If you have an image flashing, two images flashing, you will be able to tell how fast or which one is coming before the other one for less long than if you have two sounds going back and forth. You'll be able to tell for longer the order of the kind of flashing sounds. Our sense of time also changes based on what's going on, how emotions are affecting it. Those like near-death experiences that people talk about, those really dangerous times, a lot of people have recollected that it slows down time for them. And we still don't quite know why, but we are a machine. We are essentially a time machine of our own. There's also spending long amounts of time in caves. Some time researchers have done this, and they felt like they got robbed of months of their lives because what they were experiencing as one day was closer to 23 hours, 23 and a half, I think, when, of course, it's just 24. And so they emerged months later and felt like they hadn't actually lived that amount of time. And the next one, of course, is TimeSpace. So, and in this one, all bets are off. So this is what we've researched is actually time. And how we can experience this is just a drop in the bucket. So that, gravity is actually caused by a warping of time-space. There are, by the way, black holes in the middle of all galaxies that we've observed, all major galaxies, and black holes are have time and space stopping at some point in the middle. So what does it look like when time and space have stopped, when there is no more? What happens then? How do we fathom anything outside of space and time, let alone that we link that both are actually the same thing? Time and space is closer to cutting a loaf of bread. So if you cut it a little bit differently, you can actually relate 2 points the same. And that's why if you have a spaceship that is going quite fast outside of the Earth, and then you have a twin on the spaceship, you have a twin on Earth, the twin comes back from space and will have aged less than the twin that stayed on Earth. So how does that work for us? We are so limited. We don't know how all this actually works. So are we in a theory that is actually presentism, or do we have eternalism? If we cut this loaf at different intervals, do we actually have eternalism where we're all just bound by faith? Everything in our past has happened, is still happening right now, and everything in our future is also still happening and will happen no matter what we do. Do we actually have free will in any of this? All that we know is that this presentism is all that we experience. And why is there an error of time outside of thermodynamics? So really we're just like this, hopping along, hoping for the best iguana that's trying to learn astrophysics. And even if anyone had an answer, so let's say there's like an alien race of sorts that decides, yeah, okay, you know what, I think the humans is really worth it. I think I'm gonna spend my life explaining to the humans what time and space actually is and why everyone is in this big mess. Could we even comprehend it? And what are the stakes? So at a large scale, this is not really time and space per se, but a huge asteroid that flew very close to the Earth in July 2019. So it could have completely decimated us. It did before. What keeps it from happening again? This is stuff that we do understand, and we can't even deal with that. How can we deal with the stuff that we don't understand? So basically there is what we know, there is what might ever within our biology be possible for us to know. And then there's what we will absolutely never know. Even if we lived forever and could evolve, there's nothing that guarantees that we would see things as they truly are. We would see them as it is practical for us to navigate. It's practical for us to think about things. It's not practical to be just afraid of what you don't know all the time. We can't do anything about it, but it's still there. So who cares? Why should you care? So you can be afraid? This sounds like fun. So let's just keep going on. Let's just keep on supporting these types of worldviews. Earth is flat, cool. Does it really matter? Maybe, maybe not. That's it.